All right, here you have Donald Trump, who tried to broker peace between Israel and Iran, now frustrated and hopping mad. US President Donald Trump is right now angry. Donald Trump is angered by both Israel and Iran violating ceasefire. Hours after declaring a US-Qatar brokered ceasefire between the two arch enemies, Donald Trump has now lashed out, literally using expletives, warning Israel against launching fresh attacks on Iran. The ceasefire barely held on. In fact, Israel accused Iran of violating the ceasefire, claiming to have intercepted a missile fired from Iranian territory and threatened to respond in full force, while Iran has flatly denied, saying that they have not fired those missiles. Strange. Despite the denials, shelling we saw unfolded in Ahvaz, Iran. There was, including cities like Sheba in Israel. Both sides faced renewed strikes and attacks. Trump, visibly furious, spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu in what White House sources describes as exceptionally firm and direct terms. That's what the conversation was. In fact, he did not mince words. While speaking to the media as well, Donald Trump there almost abusive, claiming that he tried, but clearly both nations do not want to adhere to the deal.
There's a one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what they're doing. Do you understand that?
Now, the anger comes literally a day after Washington itself escalated the conflict. In fact, a few days ago, we saw how United States decided to strike 3 of Iranian's nuclear sites, a major flashpoint that pushed both nations to the brink. Now, the same United States has come around to ask and call for ceasefire, striking a deal using Qatar's help. But seems like both the countries aren't yet in a position to calm nerves. Iran's top security council has now issued its own warning, saying any further escalation from Israel will be met with equal force and retaliation. Foreign Minister Syed Abbas has echoed the same line, saying that there was no ceasefire agreement in the first place. And in fact, if at all there is a ceasefire agreement, then Israel should adhere to it. If Israel violates the ceasefire, then we will also strike back equally. That's what Iran says. India finally has weighed in. India has responded in a first statement. India says we welcome ceasefire between the two countries. India saying that war is not good for the entire region, asking for both sides to posture and to come to a dialogue table. Well, we're looking at the United States, along with Qatar's help, to try and diffuse tensions between the two nations. It seemed to have worked to a large extent, but will this ceasefire really hold? Let me bring in our panelists right here joining us live. We have Eli Perbs, Director International Relations, joining us from Israel itself, live from Jerusalem. Thank you, sir. We have Major General retired V.K. Datta, Defense and Geopolitical Expert. We also have Rabindra Sachdeva, Foreign Affairs Expert and President, Image India Institute. Thank you very much, all of you. At my first question to, of course, Eli, who joins us live from Israel. Eli, what happens to the ceasefire? What happened to it? Right this morning, we hear and we saw, we have our reporter very much there in Israel right now, and he did report on the sites that they saw. Some of the missiles coming in the way of Israel that was intercepted, but Iran says it wasn't us.
Yeah, there's no doubt. First of all, thank you for having me on. There's no doubt that all Israelis were woken up. We found out about the alleged ceasefire at the exact same time when Iran was breaking the ceasefire. So yes, it's fair to ask how secure the ceasefire is. It is understandable that President Trump would feel outraged, would feel upset. And if he's trying to bring Iran to the table, he needs to go ahead and lash out at Israel. Clearly, he sees the conflict through Israel's lens. He sees Iran as a threat, not just to Israel, but also a threat to the United States of America. If he is going to be seen as someone who is trying to bring both sides to the table, trying to put together a ceasefire, Everybody knows that he's on Israel's side, and the only way that he can make Iran feel comfortable is by lashing out at Israel. He understands that if he actually is hoping to try to create peace and that his strike the other night on Iran's nuclear capabilities is designed to create peace, the only way that will happen is if Israel enforces this ceasefire. And there is a model for this. A few months ago, Israel signed this ceasefire agreement with Iran's largest and most dangerous proxy, Hezbollah. And at the time, Hezbollah had been attacking Israel from Lebanon. Israel largely decapitated it, but they were still going back and forth. A ceasefire agreement was signed where Israel has consistently been enforcing it, meaning anytime Hezbollah is making attempts to try to shoot missiles at Israel, transfer weapons, ends up that Israel takes them out. And that hasn't led to more fighting. It's actually led to a much more stable and peaceful Lebanon. The same potentially could be true in Iran, but it will take a real enforcement mechanism. And the only entity that has the willingness and the courage to do so is Israel.
You know, Major General V.K. Datta, if you could give us a sense on this truce or this ceasefire that Donald Trump announced soon after Iran struck at some of the U.S. military bases in the Middle East. In your view, is this diplomatically premature? Nerves haven't even calmed down, and before which you have United States President says, well, all is over now, ceasefire declared, a deal has been struck. But both sides didn't live up to it as expected. In fact, Iran says there was never a deal.
Nabila, it's been a complicated situation. As far as Israel is concerned, for them, this war started on 7th of October 2023, when Hamas carried out a massive terrorist attack across the line and killed 1,200 Israeli citizens and took away 250 as hostages. And it was a dastardly action. And therefore, Israel subsequently started the counteroffensive to sort out Hamas in Gaza, and then, of course, joined by Hezbollah, and that was a separate situation for Israel. And then also the situation created by the Houthis from Yemen and some elements from the side of Syria. And at that point in time, all these proxies were being supported by Iran, and therefore Iran was the instigator behind the entire situation faced by Iran. And as it is, we all know that the mindset in Iran has been that they don't want Jewish state to exist at all. They always say death to America, death to Israel. So now, ultimately, Israel had to come and resolve the issues with Iran and make sure that the so-called nuclear threat, which they will pose subsequently as a nation having nuclear weapons and carrying out terrorism under the umbrella of a nuclear threat, like we've had a situation with Pakistan, that terrorism being instigated under a nuclear umbrella. So it becomes more complicated. So now, therefore, Israel carried out and started the operation Rising Lion to neutralize the nuclear capability of Iran. And okay, maybe try a regime change, but that takes a lot of time, because when countries go at war, the people rally behind the government, whichever it may be. And that is what happened in Pakistan also with Asim Munir. He was being abused every day in Pakistan, but when he started the situation with India, he became, the people rallied behind him. Anyway, so that's a different situation. Now we come on to the element, how far Israel was able to decapacitate the Iranian nuclear capability or the effort to become nuclear power or to develop nuclear weapons. They struck their nuclear establishment. 18, 19 nuclear scientists have been knocked out. The IRG commanders have been knocked out. But, we know in the modern day, technology can be passed on. It can be saved in computers. The younger generation can pick up from there and start on. And now comes the question of what happened to the nuclear fissile material, whether it was in Natanz, Isfahan, or in Fordo, or wherever the other locations. So now the thing is that the Iranians have made a statement that somewhere in March, they moved the entire nuclear fissile material to a safer site. They knew that Israel is going to attack. Now, if we take that as a maybe truth to some extent, that means that Iran has been able to save some of the nuclear fissile material to a safer site. If in Gaza they have hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of tunnel system, you be rest assured they must be having similar tunnel systems in Iran itself, maybe connecting their sites to one another. So maybe they have moved the material to maybe another safer location within that labyrinth of tunnels underground. So that time will tell. Now, what is the final, what you call the the target analysis? Uh, how much we were able to achieve? That again, confirmation will come slightly later. But now comes the question of
Israel though has claimed that they've managed to get all nuclear sites of Iran, and they've set back Iran's plans to build a nuclear weapon by at least the next
because
40
Nabila,
years.
that is what I'm trying to highlight.
Right, sir.
That have we been able to actually cap that entire effort? So I will say yes, maybe no. Time will tell. But what the Americans did to help out Israel was to use their B-2 bombers with GB-257 to knock out Fordo. So when we talk about Fordo, Isfahan and Trans, they had different capabilities and different type of activity going on in three sites. So now, how far we have been able to push back their effort as far as nuclearization is concerned, that again time will tell, and damage assessment when we get.
Right.
But now comes the question of ceasefire. When the Americans struck the three sides, Iranians at that time threatened that we are going to hit back at the Americans. So what best could they do? Hit out any of the locations where the Americans have their deployment in the Middle East, whether it is in Iraq or Qatar or Kuwait or wherever. So they choose to strike Qatar, and maybe some inputs are coming that actually warned maybe that they're going to strike Qatar, but the Americans had already moved their assets out of Qatar. So okay, fine, and the president said okay, fine. They vented their anger by striking, sending in few missiles, which most of them were shot out, and one of them maybe which were not in a target area went away. So now the question was, will the ceasefire hold? We know by experience and being an army man myself, whenever you have a ceasefire situation coming in, the armies and the opposing forces which are poised to attack each other will let go at the last moment, the last salvo. Whatever has been loaded in the guns or the missiles which are ready, they'll let go. And that will give you a crunch around right at the fag end of a ceasefire. And that is what the Iranians did, and maybe that is what the Israelis also did. And thereafter,
so then in that case, if that was how it should have happened and that was expected, can I safely say then the ceasefire is here to stay? Rabindra Sachdeva, would you look at this as a final deal done, brokered by US and Qatar? Do you believe that Iran and Israel will live up to the deal now? Do you see signs of it?
Yeah, more or less, but I want to do a quick bit of bullet and tangential points. And we are living in the world of two things, a realpolitik and instant gratification. One, keep that aside. Why does, for example, Iran say death to America? Have we ever thought about it? 1953 or 54, whatever, Americans engineered a coup, street rebellion with money, etc., and dislodged a democratically elected leader of Iran. Any doubt on that? Then Shah Reza Pahlavi, oil, etc., going to waste. So let's not get wrapped into slogans which have become a narrative. One. Second, keeping that aside, the ceasefire which is there right now, I think would hold, could hold, will hold, because Trump is the one, Trump holds some Trump cards. Israel cannot continue its whatever mission without the support of America. Defense of Israel is guaranteed by America. Any missiles by anyone, forget Iran, are protected by a defense layer of America. Any doubt of that? Israel, its annual defense budget is $24 or $23 billion. Every year, $4 billion, and every 10 years it's renewed. is given as plain simple aid, American taxpayer money to Israel for its defense. So let's not get, I mean, my point is that, yeah, sure, many things are happening. Now, coming to the present one, ceasefire, I do think will hold because Trump was a part of it. And, there's been a discussion going around that Operation Sindoor of India, where Trump claimed credit for bringing a peace around, is a very different game. In India's case, America was not an involved party.
Yeah.
In the case of Israel, America is a party. America is bombing Iran. America is giving money to Israel. So when America says to Israel, stop, Israel will have to stop. Big picture. Though, yes, Netanyahu has been playing, and perception is this whole narrative that, see, 10 years ago also, Israel was saying that within 2 months, Iran will have a nuclear weapon. 5 years ago, they were saying the same thing. Fair enough. It's heading to a nuclear weapon, which is not a good thing for anyone to have. So Netanyahu, Israel have managed to persuade America, drag them into the war, and fair enough, America has gone along willingly. They think it's in their self-interest also into this, destroying of these nuclear facilities there. Then with Qatar, yes, another question coming often, I'm just looking at, various discussions I've been on panels today, that this ceasefire, Trump woke up in the morning and just tweeted that, oh, stop the war. No. Iran attacked the American base in Qatar. America did not respond. That was all coordinated. So the ceasefire was being planned already in the past 24, 36 hours between the US, Israel, Iran, the Emir of Qatar. By the way, Qatar, a small country, ends up always being very, pivotal in many such world,
Absolutely. But
matters of
it
world
was
affairs.
Qatar that was also targeted. You had
Yeah, no,
the
but
airbase,
that was
US
drama.
airbase in
That was
Doha.
drama. That was drama from what we know. That was drama from what we know. Why did then America not attack back? Imagine Iran having the audacity to attack an American base in Qatar and Trump saying, oh, fine, we'll let it go. So it has been choreographed
You're
in
saying
that
it
way
was
to
a
give,
fixed match? Are you saying
yeah,
this
it
was a
was
fixed match?
absolutely to give the Iranians a face saving so that they could claim to their domestic audiences, yeah, we are fighting against the big Satan. For them, America is the big Satan, Israel is the small Satan. So the Iranian regime is cornered. They have been, virtually decapitated like a chicken, the neck gone.
Mr. Rabindra, I'd like you to hold on for the moment. For our viewers, I will take you through what happened in the last 24 hours. Tensions that surged after Iran fired missiles targeting multiple US military bases across the Middle East, escalating the standoff after American airstrikes pounded Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. That was Iran's response as we saw multiple air bases, multiple military bases of the United States in some of the Middle Eastern countries. In fact, threat was that this could escalate to other Middle Eastern countries, but for sure, we have confirmation that Iran struck the military base of the United States in Doha, Qatar. Explosions rocked Doha as missiles were seen lighting up the night sky there, visuals on our screens. Several of them were intercepted, but the panic was indeed real. The Al Udeid Air Base, America's biggest military hub in the Middle East, sits just outside Doha, housing close to 10,000 US troops, but none of them had any injury, which is why some could call this a staged attack. But all the US personnel there were evacuated safely even before the attack. Qatar condemned Iran's attack, though, calling it a flagrant violation of its sovereignty. As tempers flared, Gulf Arab nations scrambled. Foreign ministers from 6 Gulf states are now meeting in Doha for an emergency summit. The 49th extraordinary meeting of the GCC Ministerial Council is now underway, aiming at rallying behind Qatar, sending a united message on protecting the region's stability. Now, if I can bring in Mr. Rabindranath on that, sir, while we see that there could be very easily claims that this was a staged attack, at the same time, you have Middle Eastern countries right now seething. UAE, for that matter, also shut its airspace out of panic because they have US military bases located there as well. Of course, Qatar, Bahrain, all of them went on a on a panic spree. Last night, I was right here reporting right after my show. All this played out while Iran attacked Qatar's military base, U.S. military base in Qatar. So there was a lot of questions on how the Middle Eastern countries, including UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi, would respond to Iran. They're very angry right now, but we haven't heard any formal statement coming in collectively or individually for any one of these countries. But how would you look at it? Now, Iran, well, it could be very well staged between Iran and US, but Qatar on its part is angry. You have UAE that's angry right now, Saudi that's angry. They're all silent for the moment, but they're angry. They're not okay. They're not happy with Iran posing a threat to them.
Madam, I suggest a simple thing. It's out there all in media that Iran had informed Qatar prior to the attack that they're going to do this. Americans knew about it, so it was all staged. Okay, to give Iran a off-ramp, so to say that Iran could claim to its domestic audiences, look here, they bombed us, Americans, and now we are bombing America's largest air command, central command center in Qatar. It was staged. It was informed. It's out there all in the media.
Running out of the mall, we saw people running out in panic. If we have those visuals, we have people running about in panic, helter-skelter. People were really worried. Anything could have happened.
All there in the
you
media.
had missiles there firing up in the sky.
We go by what we read. I'm not there on the ground, but if you read all world media today, New York Times, Washington Post,
that is
Al
what is
Jazeera,
speculated that Qatar was informed prior, but the civilians,
so
I would be surprised if one of them had a heart attack.
Sure. I mean, okay, that's a collateral. Polite term, collateral, human lives lost, like collateral.
There
like
you have
in Gaza,
it, the malls there in Qatar that had people running helter-skelter. It really came as a shock.
That's
and
small
airspace,
collateral.
you had
Human
multiple airlines that cancelled, rerouted. Airspace was closed across countries of the Middle East. So, you know, government to government, even if they've had a deal prior, it's unfortunate, like you call it, collateral damage. It's always the civilians bearing the brunt.
Sure. I mean, I don't want to, take up too much time, but that's it. It's a fact. So the ceasefire, when people are talking that Trump woke up one day and he's trying to tell both of the parties stop the war, what I'm trying to say is that this whole ceasefire thing has been curated between Netanyahu, the Emir of Qatar, US, Iran, Witkoff, Crown Prince, Saudi Arabia. Because you see, the biggest fear of the Saudis and the Emirates and all is that if this conflict spirals, it's going to bring down maybe their governments. These are all monarchies. They're living on the riches, and the people in these countries are sure also getting rich, but there's a pro-Palestinian sentiment in these countries. So there's going to come a time when Jordan and Egypt and maybe Saudi will face a revolution on their streets. They're afraid of that. That's why they again worked with US, whatsoever, to tamp down this fire which was going to rage otherwise in the Middle East. That's my thought.
Sir, I will have you stay with us. If a quick look at the protests, as much as we say that the United States at this point is trying to bring peace across the world by ensuring Iran does not have a nuclear weapon and aiding Israel in this quest, you have civilians across many parts of the world not in agreement with US approach. US President's decision to launch airstrikes against Iran saw widespread demonstrations from Washington, Toronto, London, New York, Athens, Karachi. Protests against the United States were launched in full spate. In fact, the US, we know, struck multiple locations in Iran, particularly the nuclear sites. And here you have people in the United States itself very angry with US going forward with this strike against Iran. And you saw these protests that were held day and night in the last 2 days in New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. In fact, these were what the visuals that were played out across many different parts of the United States condemning the US President Donald Trump of not prioritizing United States, but instead prioritizing Israel. And let me take in our panelists on this. Eli, who's from Israel. All right, we've lost his connection. Well, there you have it. So, General Datta, if you could jump in on this. I wanted to ask the Israeli panelists on joining us, but we seem to have lost his connection. We're looking at people protesting against U.S. action, particularly Donald Trump's attacks on Iran. Not very happy. Civilians out there on the streets condemning this, saying U.S. is prioritizing Israel and not America.
Yeah, Nabila, if you go back before the American attack on Iran, 60% Americans in a vote had said America should not join this war with Israel against Iran. 60%. 70% Republicans themselves had voted against America going to war against Iran for Israel. And though many Americans also said that Iran should not be making a nuclear device. Now, with that backdrop, when the public within US and the Republican Party by themselves were against this involvement of US in attacking Iran, so naturally these protests would be seen on the ground, on the streets of US and many other parts of the world. But now the thing is that Donald Trump was under a dual pressure. One was the pressure of the public within the Republicans, and of course, the Democrats always trying to pull down Donald Trump. At the other end were the Jewish influencers and the influence of the Jewish community in the US and his own business partners who have a lot of sway on Trump that you have to do something for Israel. And therefore, Trump thought the best way out was to strike those 3 nuclear sites from which he knew, and maybe 2 days earlier, from Fordo itself, a number of trucks had come to take out whatever was left out in Fordo, and therefore, I personally feel that Fordo was evacuated by the Iranians before the Americans stuck there. So the Americans, of course, did a aerial strike by B-2 bombers using the GBU-57. Whatever damage they have been able to achieve has yet to be confirmed. Finally, by independent authorities to see whether they were actually able to totally decapacitate these sites or not. So therefore, after the Americans were able to do that, they got their assets back safely back to the US or to their bases. Then the Americans said, okay, fine. And the statement of the president that, of course, Iran wanted to vent its anger and they stuck Qatar base of theirs. So they knew that. So he said, okay, you vent your anger on me, makes no difference, we'll shoot down your missiles, it is not going to cause any damage. And so that is it. So the protest which you see today is that backdrop of the people
the protest
voting.
If we could have on our screens, please.
Yeah. And now brokering a ceasefire don't happen by a turn on and turn off. That means a lot of homework must have been done. The Iranian foreign minister had met Mr. Putin, he was there in Moscow. I'm very sure that maybe something also went in between Putin and maybe the US president as to how they're going to resolve this particular this thing. So the happiest people in this entire game were the Turkish, who wants to become a Khalifa, maybe the Saudi Arabians, they also want to become a Khalifa of the Muslim world, and Russia, because the entire attention was diverted away from Ukraine towards the Middle East. So now, finally, whether the ceasefire holds, I personally wish that it holds, because maybe everybody has achieved its aim of targeting whatever they were getting.
We all wish with all our heart that this holds, because it's not doing any good to West Asia. Oil prices shot up, but thankfully it's now down after calls for ceasefire. We're really hoping on both sides they live up to it. But Ellie, a quick word. United States has been fully supporting Israel on its quest. But we're also looking at civilians turning against the US government. You have large protests that are being carried out across different parts of the United States. Your comment on that?
Well, President Trump is someone who really has a great pulse for the American people, and he understands that he wants to try to create peace. He was successful in his first administration by creating the Abraham Accord, something that most international observers couldn't even imagine. And then not only was he able to create it, but it's sustained itself over the last 5 years, including an unprecedented war between Israel and Hamas and Israel and many Iranian proxies. As we move forward right now, President Trump's goal is obviously once again to create peace. And he understands that the only way that peace is going to flow out of this Iran-Israel war is if the ceasefire is enforced. And I think Israel has the ability to enforce it as long as the Iranian regime stays in power in Iran. Israel is going to be at risk. The international community is going to be at risk. And as we saw yesterday, most of the neighboring Arab Middle Eastern countries understand they are at risk. The Strait of Hormuz was threatened last night with being closed. That is not beneficial for the world. So we want to create peace. President Trump wants to create peace. Israel wants to create peace. Short term, the ceasefire may work. Long term, there will have to be a regime change, but that ultimately is up to the Iranian people, not the Israeli Iranians.
Well, finally, Mr. Rabindra, your take on this ceasefire. I would like to ask you, a lot of questions being raised as to how and why Muslim countries like Saudi, UAE and the rest aren't really explicitly backing Iran at the moment. Why do you think they've all washed their hands off? They've let Iran fight for itself.
Sure. I mean, several layers upon layers on this aspect. One is the idea of the Sunni Shia divide within the Islamic community, right? That's one. Secondly, I think if one really thinks the issue is, to my mind, the interests of the monarchies and the rulers who are ruling their countries. All of these states in this region, Saudis, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE, Egypt, Jordan, are dictators who are not elected, who are gaining the spoils of money, and who want to do good for their countries, and who think that the good of their countries lies in a better relationship with America, in a big picture, economic development. But on the other hand, the disconnect is that the issue of Palestine out there. So they are doing a tap dance. When the Crown Prince and all the Arab states, if you see their statements condemning Israel, for example, for the actions in Gaza, they're just paying lip service. They're paying that lip service because they want to themselves be in power and at the same time convey to their domestic audiences, populations, that yes, I'm standing up for the cause of Islam. In the process, they're doing a disservice to both the causes.
Correct.
Neither they are standing up for the country, nor for the cause of Islam, nor for the cause of the people. So sometime or the other, this contradiction will blow up. And I think that's one of the reasons also for this ceasefire. Not only Trump waking up in the morning and Qatari is the emir playing very smart, but Saudis are worried, UAE is worried, Kuwait is worried, Bahrain is worried, Jordan lives on American aid. But the people are not in sync with the King Abdullah, I think he was there, right?
So
Egypt.
So it's basically
it's a tinderbox. It's
Yeah.
a tinderbox.
Correct.
Unless the Palestinian issue is solved, this whole region will continue to go
simmer.
value up, value down.
And ultimately it comes down to the economics of it. And if you have the region there already burning their pockets because of this war that plays out, then I'm sure the wiser thing for them to do is right now step back and not contribute to this war or aggravate it any further, because it harms and hurts every one of them, including India for that matter. Well, thank you very much. India's statement was clear today that they welcome ceasefire. India has always been on the side of peace, and with the Israel-Iran clash and war that plays out, you have India yet again reinforcing that war is not the solution. Thanks very much, our panelists, for joining us on that. A quick look is Operation Sindhu that still continues. We're looking at evacuation that's still underway from Israel. We saw a whole bunch of Indians who were brought Amid the spiraling tensions, they were brought to India. The mission comes in the wake of the US bombings as well on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, and of course Iran bombarding parts of Israel. So on both nations you had Indians that were stranded. They were all safely evacuated, 292 nationals from Iran, 366 from Israel. Flights from Mashhad landed in New Delhi at 3:30 a.m. today. Total number of Indian nationals evacuated from Iran so far has been 2,295. That's a huge number. Indian government has managed to do this seamlessly and brought back everyone safely. Those are visuals that are coming in. Also from Israel, 161 Indians have been flown back on a chartered flight from Amman, which landed at 8:20 a.m. So back-to-back flights that are coming in, evacuation flights that are coming in from Israel and Iran, all landing safely in India.